At age 22, after serving in the U.S. Air Force as a fighter jet crew chief, I was honorably discharged from McCord Air Force Base just outside of Seattle. And after 4 years serving active duty, the last thing I wanted to do really was to get a job. So for the next few months, I did what I really wanted to do, which was to let my hair grow long and live off my savings and think about my life, which to me back then meant to drink. And so it was. Saturday morning, I wake up to breakfast, a beer. And it's such a good breakfast, I have another beer. And I take that beer out into the courtyard, the apartment where we live. And I see across the way my buddy, who's got his 10-year-old boy visiting him. Now this is rare, because my buddy and his ex-wife are not on good terms. He just got visitation rights. She just doesn't trust this guy. She thinks that he is an irresponsible alcoholic. And as I ponder that, shaking my head for this poor, irresponsible alcoholic, I crack another beer. And my buddy goes back inside, watches TV, and his boy comes across the grass to talk to me. And by now, I've got this warm, fuzzy buzz on, and I say, "Hey kid, you ever seen a fighter jet up close?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, let's go." And so I jump on my motorbike, he jumps on back, we go out to McCord Air Force Base, it's only a half mile away, and as we get up to the main gate, the MP there is distracted by something. He's looking down, he doesn't see this long-haired guy with the kid on back coming by, he just waves us right on through. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this buzz I got on is big enough to include him too. We get out to the flight line. It's Saturday, deserted, only the jets lined up like a row of silver darts. So I take him out. We're climbing over the wings. We're climbing around the landing gear. I show him where the bombs hook up. I show him the 20-millimeter cannon. And then I think, I want this to be a memory he has for the rest of his life. So I take him inside the hangar. Huge corrugated metal barn, and parked inside 2 F-106 fighter interceptors. One of them hooked up to an external power unit, so I flip the power on, the jet lights up like a Christmas tree. I take the kid, we go up the ladder, I show him the cockpit, the panels all lit up, I show him the radar and the scope and the throttle and the stick and the rudder, and I said, "You see that switch right there? If we flip that switch right now, this jet starts." And it's at that moment I hear this voice shout from the other side of the hangar, and I look over, I see a military policeman, my first oh shit moment, and I say, "Yes sir," and he says, "Do you have authorization to be here?" And I say, "Officer, not a problem, I used to work on these jets all the time, I know these jets like the back of my hand." And he says, "Okay," and he walks out the door. And I'm thinking to myself, this buzz of mine is big enough to include the whole world, which is exactly what I'm thinking half a minute later when the door slams open, 15 MPs charge in with M16s and sidearms drawn, all pointed at me. Next thing I know, I'm face down on the concrete, spread eagle, hands behind my back, handcuffed, my forehead scraping the concrete as they drag me up, and the boy drag him into the paddy wagon. Heading off to the other side of base, Office of Special Investigations, OSI. We get to the holding pen, and the kid is going, "My parents are really going to be mad at me. I'm in all kinds of trouble." And I said, don't worry, it's just a big misunderstanding. I'll have it cleared up in just a minute." And that minute turns to an hour, and another hour, and another hour, and then finally I get called into this tiny room for my interrogation. But it's not a 100-watt bulb in my face interrogation. It's a reasonable guy sitting across from a reasonable desk talking to another reasonable guy, me, asking some very reasonable questions. Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? Did you know you were a switch away from starting that jet? And I've got nothing to hide. I tell him everything. And half an hour later, I'm back out in the holding pen sitting next to the boy. But by now, I'm starting to get worried because the buzz I had on is long since gone. I'm looking out the window and it is dark. I don't know how long I've had this kid. All I know is when the OSI officer comes back in, he's got a piece of paper and he said, "We had to wake up the base commander to sign this letter, which states, if you set foot on this base again, You will be arrested and imprisoned for not less than 6 months. You will be fined not less than $10,000. We're hauled back to my bike. We both get on, get an MP escort outside the base, and as I'm riding into the darkness with a boy hooked on back, I think to myself of the coming explosion that's sure to happen when I come to his dad's place at the apartment complex. And I think to myself, you know, the 2,000 miles to Mexico is not that far to ride.